today is 10 years since the death of the Greek aesthetician, curator, musician, Greg Vamvakas. Greg planned a long life for himself with an exploration of a contribution over decades, but he died a few months short of his 33rd birthday 10 years ago. And sometimes we don't want to speak because we have good words, but we have an ethical impulse to go silent, just because words don't feel adequate to capture the brutal and contingent disaster that happened. And we want to go silent not because we feel that the world can't absorb what's happened. We want to go silent because we know that nothing happens that the world can't absorb. The world can absorb Greg's death. The world has absorbed the deaths of Schubert and Keats, two extraordinary premature tragedies that are unforgivable and which force us to keep balancing acceptance with refusal to accept. At the center today, as always, are Greg's mum and Greg's dad. He loved them very much. And he loved his brother Vasilis, and today we're thinking of Vasilis and of Vasilis' family. Then come relatives and friends is straight away an interesting thing with Greg, because he had special thoughts about what friendship was, what friendship could be. And let's open a wine, because we're not just going to be crying, we are dancing too. This is Mavro Tragano from the great late Greek winemaker Hatzidakis from Santorini, and this is the last vintage Hatzidakis did before he himself prematurely died. So Greg had interesting thoughts about friendship, and of course Greg wasn't the only Greek to think about friendship. He was preceded by Aristotle in this. And Aristotle thought something that Greg absolutely despised about friendship. And that's that friendship, while a very important ritual that could be utterly magical, for Aristotle was too much of an ethical enterprise. In other words, Aristotle felt that friendship made the friends involved in the friendship morally better. And that just stands against everything Greg believed in. For him, friendship was about loyalty, it was about love, and love was for Greg about seeing the distinctiveness of the other individual, seeing exactly how they were unlike anybody else in the world, and accepting that, and in accepting that, helping them accept themselves. And the chief enemy of deep, loving, magical, lifelong friendship for Greg was not immorality, but error. Friendship don't tolerate an excess of error. You can't be wrong about the other person. So that was the chief threat for Greg. It was not his friend going on to rob the bank. That was okay. And he thought of his life as a whole. He thought of his life as a very big block of time, out of which he could build something, across which he would explore something. Here is him talking about it. And he thought of friendship in the same way. He thought of friendships as lives that run parallel to one another and make one another's lives go better and be more beautiful. And it was a great pleasure to participate with him in this. And at the same time, now we're looking at him being gone for 10 years to the day. You know, I'm grateful to Dylan Thomas actually for his line. Very salty and tertiary and minerally and sour and sweet. One of Greece's most distinctive reds. I'm grateful to Dylan Thomas for his line about how something occurred a grief ago, because grief speeds up time, slows time, frames time, and it's also really important that as time passes, the shock doesn't diminish. So we lost this extraordinary man just a few months shy of his 33rd birthday. Surely 10 years on, it should be a little bit more tranquil and peaceful as an existential event. No, it's not. It's just not. It's just not at all. Imagine somebody being taken away further and further and further out into the ocean. When you see them so far out, is that going to be less shocking than them being close to the shore? Or more shocking? You know? So that's a difficult one. And I think that, you know, the shock doesn't go. The shock doesn't go in 10 years. The shock doesn't go in 50 years. It's just, you know, it's just there. It is whatever it is. Let me say a little bit about the kind of qualities Greg had as a man. And this could be a terribly long conversation because he had so many qualities and so many faults also that he was working on. And that was one of the most remarkable thing about him, how quickly he moved to make progress with the things he needed to work on in himself. And some of them were to do with just having challenges growing up, coming to terms with being a gay man. But he always moved fast and was moving faster than ever when he died. And he was happier than ever, actually, when he died, even though he still had some good progress to make. But there was one area in which he didn't need to make progress, in which he had already pretty well arrived. And that was something like the existential groundedness he got out of engaging with art. You see, I think for Greg, art simply justified existence. If you look at all of these men around North America and Europe who followed Jordan Peterson, Greg would have been endlessly interested in that. But it would have been so utterly alien to him, because the very idea that you could have sort of existential problems, that you could sort of feel like you might need to wet your pants a bit existentially, that was completely alien for him, because there was art, and art simply justified existence. There were, in particular, musical values that were very close to his heart. And that might sound like a strange thing. What do you mean musical values? What kind of musical values could they be? There are moral values, social justice, you know, some kind of relationship with spirituality, some kind of idea of how to parent children. These are values. And people often are deeply committed to them and identify in terms of them. Well, Greg thought they were musical values. He thought there were about 7 of them, and some were more important than others. And if you pushed me against the wall, and I've got to be honest here, the answer would be the same for me as for him, but if you pushed me against the wall and said, what's the number one value in Greg's life, value of any kind, I would say it's the musical value of rhythmical strength. That's to say how one note is related to another in terms of the second note that follows the first, not coming too soon and not coming too late, and being full of not just freedom, but also tension. And the move between the first and the second note is for Greg something that needed to be spatial, three-dimensional, and as I say, at once full of tension and free. And engaging with that value in his head, in his body, in his musical practice, because Greg was basically a concert pianist, was as important and as fulfilling as anything in the world. And he was drawn above all to the musicians he felt displayed this quality on the highest level. You can find conversations I'm going to link up about some of these musicians on this channel. He was enormously attracted to the pianists Alfred Cortot, Edwin Fischer, Wilhelm Kempff, and Alfred Brendel. And he was in love with the youthful Maria Callas, before Maria Callas became histrionic around 1954. And he was, of course, greatly moved by the supreme rhythmical strength of the conductor Furtwängler. Sometimes Greg was too physiologically, somatically sensitive. So he recognized certain musical performances as being great, but he couldn't physically cope with them. They had too much of an effect. He felt a kind of tension or a kind of stress or a kind of pressure around the neck. Sometimes his gums hurt. And there were two artists in particular, the pianist Alfred Cortot and Furtwängler, the conductor, who in some performances made Greg feel too physically stressed for him to carry through the listening experience. But he understood that as his fault and not theirs. And within a few years, he would have somehow calibrated his physical response to be more objective to what is actually happening in the music. And that's something he was passionate about too, getting your body to a place where it reacts so proportionately that you can read off it objective characteristics in the work to which your body is responding. And so that's certainly a very elevated, a very objectivist, and a very existentially central view of art. And that was his view. That was who he was, and that was how he lived. The only thing I want to say to end with is that alongside this high seriousness, there was frivolity, lightness, stupidity, immaturity, which he didn't want to lose. And that itself was not completely disconnected from his highest aspirations. Because in the end, he felt that if you got rid of superficiality in the world, you'd be getting rid of human beings. And that would be a very misanthropic kind of thing to do. And there is a variation, that's variation number 25, that I'm going to link up in Beethoven's Diabelli variations. And in it, and it only lasts about 50 seconds, Beethoven mocks human beings for the way they are ludicrously victimized by their sense of purpose, whereas in fact they are delusional and self-deceiving and have no idea where they're going at all. And that message Beethoven gives not with derision, but with love. And that is actually very close to how Greg saw the world. Superficiality and jokes and paradox were for him not a contrast to the things that really mattered. they were part of what really, really, really mattered. And if you try to abstract them away, something would go very, very seriously with your appreciation of life and with your sense of yourself in the world. I'm so grateful to you to have taken this time with me, and I look forward to carrying this conversation on. The video that's immediately linked up after this is about a young pianist who is still a child, who Greg would have been enormously but also cautiously enthused about. Cautiously because he was very keen to not overtax or overpush young people and make them into too much of a prodigy with various kinds of public demands placed on them. So that's linked up immediately after this, and I'm so grateful for spending this time with you. Take really, really great care on this extraordinary day.